The conflict between the United States and Iran has entered its third week, with the strategic and economic fallout now extending far beyond the Middle East. With more than 200 American casualties reported, the Strait of Hormuz effectively paralyzed by a naval blockade, and global Brent crude prices surging past $100 a barrel. The economic shockwaves are rattling global markets. Diplomatic fault lines are also fracturing. In a rare public display of disunity, President Donald Trump is explicitly criticizing the British Prime Minister over a lack of military support, exposing deep divisions within the Western alliance as the war expands. To understand the shifting battle lines, the mounting economic toll, and the fragile state of global alliances, stay with us as we break down the reality of this escalating conflict. When the joint military operations by the United States and Israel against Iran commenced on the 28th of February 2026, the prevailing narrative from Washington projected a swift and decisive military campaign. Today, that assessment has collided with the reality of a protracted conflict. The war is currently dragging into its third week, testing the resilience of alliances that have underpinned Western security strategy for decades. At the center of this diplomatic strain is an intensely public dispute between Washington and London. Over the past 24 hours, President Donald Trump has singled out the British Prime Minister during 3 separate media appearances. The president's frustration was evident during his latest press briefing, where he criticized the hesitancy of traditional European partners. Trump explicitly stated that he had always considered the United Kingdom to be the Rolls-Royce of allies, expressing profound disappointment that London is declining to commit Royal Navy warships to the Persian Gulf. Why do you have to meet with your team to find out whether or not you're going to send some minesweepers to us? The president demanded, rhetorically challenging the prime minister's cautious, consensus-driven foreign policy. Across the Atlantic, the British prime minister is holding a firm line, prioritizing domestic stability over the immediate requests of the American president. Facing intense parliamentary questioning today, the Prime Minister was resolute in his administration's defensive posture, stating, "While taking the necessary action to defend ourselves and our allies, we will not be drawn into the wider war." This reluctance is driven by stark domestic realities. The UK is currently grappling with a severe cost of living crisis, which has been directly exacerbated by the geopolitical instability. The economic impact is hitting British households immediately, particularly vulnerable demographics reliant on heating oil. In an emergency fiscal measure announced today, the UK government authorised a targeted £53 million relief package, which will be distributed via local councils to a significant portion of the British electorate. This is increasingly viewed as an illegal war initiated by the Trump administration, leaving the government with virtually zero political capital to justify military entanglement. Furthermore, the United Front in Washington appears to be facing internal pressure. Behind closed doors at the White House, credible reports suggest a strategic rift among top officials. Sources indicate that Vice President J.D. Vance has harbored persistent skepticism regarding the long-term viability and strategic endgame of striking the regime in Tehran. Aware of these reports highlighting a potential wedge within the administration, the President and Vice President recently held a highly publicized joint signing ceremony in the Oval Office. The event was designed to project administrative unity, though underlying strategic anxieties remain evident as the Pentagon reports mounting American casualties. While diplomatic disputes play out in Western capitals, the operational reality of the war is unfolding in one of the most heavily trafficked maritime environments on the globe, the Strait of Hormuz. To comprehend the severity of this disruption, The geographic and economic metrics are critical. This narrow maritime corridor, positioned between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, serves as the central artery for the global energy supply. Under normal conditions, roughly 20% of the world's oil supplies, equating to approximately 20 million barrels of oil every single day, transit through this choke point. Today, commercial shipping has ground to a halt. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has effectively established a naval blockade of the waterway. Their public mandate to international shipping companies was unequivocal. In response, the United States military has initiated a massive clearing campaign, aggressively targeting Iran's naval infrastructure. President Trump confidently stated that American forces are hammering their capacity to threaten commercial shipping, noting that more than 30 mine-laying ships have already been destroyed by U.S. airstrikes.
Every navigating from the Strait of Hormuz is banned from now on.
However, defense analysts suggest the reality on the water is far more complex. The Pentagon has confirmed that at least 200 American service members have been injured in the initial weeks of the conflict, indicating a high-stakes attrition battle rather than a one-sided offensive. The primary asymmetric threat capable of neutralizing advanced Western navies relies on relatively low-tech weaponry, naval mines, detonated by contact, sound, or vibration. Iran has domestically manufactured thousands of these devices. Tehran's arsenal includes drift mines, which float near the surface, moored mines, which are anchored to the seabed, bottom mines, which are placed on the seafloor, and limpet mines, which are attached to vessels, enough to deter most navies from helping. This environment exposes a critical vulnerability for Allied forces. Until recently, both the United States and the United Kingdom maintained fleets of small, crude, mine-hunting vessels stationed at naval bases in Bahrain. In a controversial defense modernization pivot, those crude ships were retired and replaced by autonomous, uncrewed mine-detecting systems. The operational flaw is that these autonomous systems remain largely untested in the chaotic, high-density reality of active combat. Furthermore, these underwater drones still require a large, crude mothership to operate in the vicinity, placing hundreds of naval personnel directly within striking distance. Former Royal Navy Commander Tom Sharp provided a blunt assessment of the tactical environment. We have a live and active surface threat, and we have a live subsurface threat. You put all those together, this is a very high-risk environment. And not too many of us have ships that are really capable of operating in that environment, even if we wanted to. This stark military assessment is the primary factor keeping British, European, and Allied warships stationed outside the conflict zone. The paralysis in the Strait of Hormuz is acting as the catalyst for a cascading global crisis. Moving into the third week of hostilities, the humanitarian, economic, and diplomatic consequences are compounding rapidly. First, the regional human cost is escalating. The Israeli military has continued to execute a wide-scale wave of aerial strikes, targeting critical infrastructure deep inside northern Tehran. Iran, fighting to preserve its regime, has retaliated across the Gulf. The Iranian Red Crescent and the UNHCR report a deepening humanitarian emergency. Over 300 people have been killed and more than 3 million Iranians have been temporarily displaced from their residences. Iran's retaliatory strategy has deliberately targeted the economic infrastructure of its neighbors. Saudi Arabia reported intercepting 60 projectiles in a single night. The United Arab Emirates has sustained the heaviest operational impact of this asymmetrical warfare. Satellite imagery confirms massive fires at major oil storage facilities in Fujairah following targeted drone strikes. Critically, Commercial aviation in and out of Dubai, the world's busiest hub for international passengers, was temporarily suspended following a drone attack in the airspace nearby. In Abu Dhabi, a rocket attack resulting in a civilian casualty has further destabilized the security environment in the Gulf. These regional disruptions are triggering a global economic shock. Wholesale energy prices have spiked, delivering a severe inflationary blow to the global markets. The price of Brent crude oil has surged dramatically from around $73 a barrel at the end of February to well over $100 today. Clearly defined the European consensus when he declared, "This is not our war." This diplomatic isolation is actively hindering US foreign policy objectives in other hemispheres. The intensity of the Iran conflict has forced President Trump to indefinitely postpone his highly anticipated state visit and bilateral summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Trump's candid public admission, "I'd love to go, but we have a war going on," illustrates how thoroughly the Middle Eastern crisis has derailed Washington's strategic pivot to Asia. Simultaneously, geopolitical competitors are observing the fracture. In the Gulf, nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are reassessing their security architecture. Having relied entirely on the United States for decades, the current vulnerability of their oil facilities is prompting a strategic review. The prevailing sentiment in diplomatic circles is to diversify. Gulf states are calculating that an exclusive security pact with a distracted United States presents a strategic liability, presenting an opening that Beijing is waiting patiently to exploit. 3 weeks into a conflict, with no clear resolution in sight, the US-Iran war is acting as a ruthless historical catalyst. It is testing the limits of modern military technology, sparking an inflationary global economic crisis, and fundamentally fracturing the alliances that have defined the post-war era. Thank you for joining us for this special report. We will continue to monitor the situation and bring you the latest developments from the region.